Good morning. It is winter here in the Rockies of Colorado. We have a lot of snow outside, and we get a lot of snow in the winter. It varies, but we usually get several feet every year. And living at about 8,000 feet in elevation, it can really pile up on some of those winter storms. So when spring rolls around, no matter how big of a skier you are, I think everyone's kind of looking forward to the snow melting and flowers blooming and the trees budding back out in leaves again. And so the vernal equinox is a time of the earth's rebirth. It's budding with new life and color, and it's waking from the slumber of winter and being covered under the snow and ice. And it's a great season to be celebrated. The pagans celebrate the spring equinox with their own festivals, and the sun and the moon line up so that the day is equal, and then the sun starts to warm and the days get longer, and it is truly a triumph over darkness, if you will. A rebirth, a regeneration, and a new start to another season. And so I was looking at how other cultures celebrate the spring equinox, and one of the interesting topics that kept coming up was the Sabbath and Passover. And I was like, I think I better refresh my memory a little bit on this. So the Jewish people celebrate Sabbath on every week throughout the entire year, and it is a day of rest. A time to relax and rest from your striving and labors, and you can do some intellectual study if you would like, but it's really just a time for family and play and relaxation. And the Sabbath begins on Friday evening, right around sunset, and it lasts 24 hours, about 25 hours, until Saturday evening at sunset. And I was looking at that, and I realized that the Christians have a very similar weekly day of rest, which is on Sunday. On Sunday, although it's not a specific designated time, it's a day for them to stop working and take a break, spend it with your family or just relaxing. So then I looked at the Jewish holiday of Passover, and Passover is a time where the Jewish culture is remembering Moses' triumph and the Israelites' freedom from Egypt, their slavery and bondage. They had been set free, and it's a time for the Jewish people to reflect upon that achievement and that promise by God. And this happens at a very specific time according to the Jewish calendar, and it happens on the 14th day of Nisan. And so I got to thinking about their aligning Passover, the triumph of Moses and the Israelites from bondage and freedom from Egypt, and the sun, the pagans' celebration of the vernal equinox, the spring equinox, and the sun's triumph over darkness and the warmth of the new season and rebirth that accompanies that. And then I noticed that the Christians celebrate Easter at the exact same time of the year. And so I looked into their tradition of Easter, and they had some practices in the 2nd century, but it really did not become a solid practice for Christians until really the 8th century. And they established fine rules for Easter, and Easter is a time where the Christians celebrate the death and resurrection of Jesus the Christ. So I started to delve a little bit deeper into their tradition and compare it to the Jewish Passover. And what I found is that the story of Jesus's crucifixion, he died, he is said to have died on the 14th day of Nisan, that aligns with the Jewish Passover, the escape from bondage of the material world. And he had to die before sunset, which of course aligns to their Sabbath. And Jesus is referred to as the sacrificial lamb, but that's also in keeping with the Jewish tradition of sacrificing the Paschal lamb for their very special feast and celebration for Passover. And so for Jesus to have died and be named the sacrificial lamb for the Christians is really just a copycat of the Jewish tradition of Passover and having a special remembrance of a time of triumph. And so then I looked at the time that they say Jesus, Jesus' death and crucifixion covered 3 days. Well, actually, it did not cover 3 days. It was very specifically aligned to the 14th day of Nisan, the first full 14th day after the full moon of the Spring Equinox. And so Jesus was actually only supposedly in the tomb for the 24-hour period or 25-hour period that corresponds to the Jewish Sabbath. So when Mary is said to have gone to the tomb and it was still dark, was it really Sunday morning or was it Saturday night? One thing that did happen with the Council of Nicaea is that they aligned Easter to coincide with the Jewish Passover, but they specifically dated Jesus' resurrection to be 2 days after the Jewish Passover began. So on a Friday night, so that he would rise on a Sunday, therefore giving them a distinction for a Sunday day of rest, a Sunday Sabbath, and making it slightly different from the Jewish tradition. So when I have said in other videos that you really have to be careful about the practices that you are following and what they mean, the Christian and the entire Christian doctrine is really based on the Jewish doctrine, but they just changed it slightly and made it their own. Kind of like singing a song. You sing a song and you change it slightly to make it your own version of the song. And that's really what happened. Since we don't have a true death date for Jesus, the Christians aligned his death and resurrection to coincide with the Jewish Sabbath and Passover festival, with similar lighting of a candle, having a special feast, a day of rest. All of it is really just a copycat of the Jewish practices and pagan practices that were established before it became an institution. And that there really isn't 3 days of Jesus's death and resurrection. It's really just a 24-hour period from Friday evening until Saturday evening, when he most likely resurrected, and that is symbolic of the empty tomb. So once again, there is more comparisons between the two religions, and you can throw in the Quran and the practice of Islam, since it is actually based upon Judaism also, and that these stories all come about from various traditions of celebrating different aspects of the Kundalini journey. Moses is 40 days or 40 years in the wilderness, and the Christian 40 days of Lent. All of that pertains to a testing period, if you will. I was 40 years old when I awakened to Kundalini, and so it all is symbolic of the journey and different aspects that happen. You die and you resurrect. You become light. Kundalini is the divine power of God rising over the material world. And all of these stories are really just describing another aspect of the Kundalini, awakening Kundalini experience. So I thought I would share that with all of you today. And I thank you for listening, and I hope you have a beautiful day. Thank you.